Hey everyone, James here from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. So today we will be talking about a tea, the Jixiang Jushi, also translates to as auspicious Guafengzhai from 2008. This one has been in Malaysian stores. Picked up a sample from LP a while ago. This is a brand that got some buzz a little bit earlier this year as well as at the end of 2024. And it's one that's also been around, when people were starting to get exposure to a lot of the Taiwanese auctions and places like that. They were one of those that wasn't tossed around quite as much as like something like XCH or YQH. But if you followed those kind of the same realms that people were getting those teas, you would definitely run into this one here and there. So a lot of those same boutique sellers would have some of the cakes of this. I don't think they necessarily had an extensive catalog. But what's interesting about this one? Well, this is actually not a Taiwanese boutique, although it tastes an awful lot like one. This one is a mainland boutique, and that's something we don't necessarily get a ton of exposure to out here in the West. That being said, there are a lot of operations. There's a lot of Taiwanese operations. A lot of that stems back to kind of that original group that came in the 90s and kind of the different operations that would stem out of that. And there are also a lot of mainland operations. Some of those are big factories, but there are also much smaller ones as well. And so this is one of those. And what's really interesting about this one is there's actually a fair bit of information now out there in English that you can check out. So I wanted to shout out ChiliCat and his Substack. He wrote a really interesting Substack where he's actually met the owner of Jixiang Jushi, who no longer presses tea regularly, but he really had a nice run here for about 10, 20 years. And he really kind of started to learn about tea and stuff like that with the Taiwanese guys. So people like Tony Chen of XCH is mentioned. He uses Tongxing Hao to press his cakes, and ChiliCat has some connections to Tongxing Manor. So he's a young guy, but he's really passionate about tea. So keep writing, ChiliCat. Appreciate the information. It's a really good post. So definitely highly recommend you check that out. I will, if I remember, I will link to that. If I have forgotten, please comment in the comments and I will make sure to get that out. There's really a crap ton of different boutiques. So the more that we can get information to help to distinguish them, the better. Also, interestingly, this is a person that was mentioned in Zhang Jinghong's book, Poor Ancient Caravans, Urban Chic, which is actually just sitting right behind the camera over there. I am doing another revisit, probably like the fourth time I've reread that book. It's interesting just to see all these different characters pop up. Zhen Silong, who is featured prominently in that book, who I hadn't really heard of, has now kind of come up recently because their tea is sold by Tea Encounter, but also because they are apparently responsible for a lot of the Yiwu pressings and the Yiwu-ish area pressings that Hailong Hao and Yunnan Sourcing have done too. So a lot of interesting people all rolled up in that same book too. So what are we looking here for today? So I've sampled a few of their teas, it reminds me so much of Taiwanese boutique. It'd be easy to mistake them. This one's Malaysian stored, so that kind of adds a little bit of a spicy twist to it. This is not from the Barren Mountain series. I think ChiliCat mentioned that the Barren Mountain series, JXJS, is a little bit kind of higher end too. So those are some things. It's Guafengzhai, so kind of from the far east side of Mainland County, a little bit of that darker, a little bit stronger is kind of the reputation that GFC tends to have. At least that's how I tend to think of it. So going to be looking at, hopefully, I'm trying to get better at looking at the processing and the wet leaves of these different teas. So going to be looking at that, seeing how fast they unfurl to see what kind of rolling was done as well. This is the favorite of the ones that I did sample. I sampled a couple others. This one's a little stronger, which is why I think it stood out over the Da Chi Shu and forgetting the other name. They're both kind of like greater Yiwu area teas though. So yeah, let's get into the brewing of this guy. This will wrap up my sample of this one. I don't think it's one I'm going to go seek out and buy, but it's interesting and I did want an excuse to talk about this vendor. So yeah, this tea producer. Yeah, let's get into the tea. All right, so here we go. Steep number 2. I just brewed the other one off camera. You know, it's been a while since I've had this tea. I drank through this for a big Yiwu report I've been working on a couple months ago. Wow, this really smells like Malaysian storage. It is a little spicy, woody. It smells nice. I do like that aroma. It is a little perfumey, and in that sense, it does remind me of some of those Taiwanese boutiques, like some of those specialty. I don't even know how that comes about exactly, but they all have this kind of like different. Each place will have a little bit of a different perfumey note to it. I mean, it's not everyone, but a lot of them do. I mean, like Yongqing Hao is probably one of the most notable ones. Bian Hao, Shiza Hao can have that too at times. Anyways, cheers. It's a little sharper. The color indicates that it's like, it's coming along, but this is not like aged. It does taste potentially a little bit oxidized, which is something that's not totally unusual for some of these like boutique type operations, especially when they're pressing from these kind of exclusive far out there areas. Very stemmy, not totally unusual there. Yeah, so this third steep, I want to push this for just a little bit. Kind of has this herbal note going on, which is true of pretty much all the JXJS I had from LP. Definitely, I feel like a product of some of that Malaysian storage. Yeah, definitely kind of like mid-dark notes, which is something that I do like. I like it when teas kind of get into this range. When it's too green, then it's a little off-putting for me. And this tea is not too green. That being said, would I prefer it if this is even further along? Probably. Yeah, but this tea definitely has a little bit of a sharper edge, which indicates that maybe it could age a bit more. Cheers. Thickness is medium. It's not super thick. Some resinous quality to this too. Yeah, I like the overall form of this. It has a nice balance of sweetness and strength. Some of the other ones were a little bit more mellowed out. And again, I like this one because it did have the kind of strongest profile of them. So brew this for just a little bit. I want to do one last one just to kind of see what we can get out of it. It's nice. Yeah, I don't mind drinking this. Definitely has that kind of sweetness that you can sometimes get from tea that's been a little bit oxidized, but it still is pretty tasty tea in my opinion. I want to be able to taste this soon, so I'm doing a bit of that Denny high pour. Cool that down just a second. And I think this is definitely like a brand if you are, the leaves are getting greener and greener. So this is like not extreme Malaysian start. I think this is a brand that's worth checking out if you are really into kind of Taiwanese boutiques and want another one. There are a lot of operations. My impression is that like there are a lot of particularly crappy operations. I think this one's relatively on par with kind of the stuff that we get exposed to. I don't think it's going to surpass like BYH as my personal favorite or anything like that. But yeah, this tea is nice. I don't mind drinking it at all. Cheers. Yeah, there's some oiliness. I wish this was just a touch thicker. It's not bad. I'm just kind of wish casting what kind of my ideal version of this would be. And it does have this like kind of sharp bitter thing to it going on too. Let's see how that resolves actually. Yeah. It's mostly resolving. It has that nice depth that you get from these Yiwu teas. I like the way the aftertaste kind of forms in the mouth too. So it seems fine to me. Yeah, and last thing we do is we will give those leaves a soak and take a look at the wet leaves. Not going to test the longevity here. Unfortunately, it's just not a great format for that sort of testing. So yeah,